Welcome to Tavern Archery. I'm Johannes von Hammersbach, and after a day in the archery field, we come into the tavern, grab a pint, sit down, and talk about all things target archery. Don't forget to aim for that subscribe button and hit like. Prost! Today in the tavern, we have Master Godai Katsunaga, member of the Order of the U-Bow, from Bright Hills, from the Kingdom of Atlantia. Welcome, Master Godai. Master Godai, can you give us some insight into Japanese archery and the Yumi bow?
Well, certainly. We'll go back in the earliest times, and the early evidence, archaeological evidence from Japan indicates that the early inhabitants used a staff bow, very similar to the staff bows that were in use in mainland Asia. The next major culture, as the Chinese called them, the Hua people, showed that they switched bows to a different style. There's actually a history book from China in the 3rd century that says of the Japanese people, their soldiers use spears, shields, and wooden bows. And the wooden bows are short on the lower part and long on the upper part. Bamboo arrows had iron heads or bone heads. Well, the bow, long and short, describes the shape of a asymmetrical Yumi as we see it today. And archery always held a very important place in Japan. It was used in Shinto religious rituals. It was used in court rituals. And there's actually a scholar who wrote that a civilized man should never fight to settle differences, but should resolve those differences through a test of shooting skills, meaning that the bow should be used to solve that. And of course, the Yumi, of course, was a weapon of war. The samurai were often known as horse and bow people. The bow was the dominant weapon on Japanese battlefields up probably until the 1600s. As one man summed it up in, I believe, about 700 or 800, he said that the strongest warriors cannot withstand the bite of the arrow, nor can the fastest man outrun a horse. And records that we've been able to uncover from battles show that about 73% of the wounds in the 14th century were caused by projectile weapons, which means obviously the bow. 15th and 16th centuries was the zenith of the bow in Japanese history and warfare. The projectile, the gun, started being more introduced in the mid-1500s. So the matchlock had a better range, about 50 meters to penetrate armor, where the bow about 30 meters to penetrate armor. But the gun was slower to reload. But the benefit was it was easier to train someone to use the gun. Just like the English archers, they had a lot of practice to become good and proficient at it. The Japanese archers, the same thing. Records indicate that from about mid-1400s to the 1600s, arrows caused about 58% of all the projectile casualties, and guns caused about 28%, the rest being thrown weapons, whether it be a spear or a knife or whatever. But gun casualties jumped to over 80% after the 1600s. So the bow was actually starting to go into a decline after the 1600s.
Master Godai, with a new archer coming into the SEA, there are so many different options, from the traditional recurve, the long bow, or the horse bow. Why the Yumi bow?
The use of a Yumi, one for persona, being a Japanese persona trying to actually do a samurai persona, the Yumi is your traditional bow of the samurai archers. The other thing about the Yumi that intrigued me was, because I shot a compound bow and used a mechanical release on my wrist, I wanted something that was going to be drawn similarly, very lengthy draw, and I didn't want to use a recurve bow because it was going to mess up my compound shooting. So I chose a Yumi strictly for the reason I wanted to be Japanese. I wanted to do the Japanese persona because I think the Japanese culture is very interesting. And I wanted to try to portray that accurately and also the fact that the draw was similar to me shooting a compound bow. It is unique. It is difficult for some people to begin with, but I also enjoyed the challenge of trying to shoot a bow that did not look like every other bow out there.
What should an archer consider before trying to shoot the Yumi bow?
I recommend that anybody who wants to learn to shoot the Yumi bow realize that the bow is very unique. The style of shooting is not like Western style. It is closer to the what we would call the Asian style draw. It is actually a thumb draw without a ring. And the bow is, being asymmetrical, shoots different from most other bows. And this takes a little bit of getting used to. So I'd recommend somebody actually do a little bit of reading prior to starting with this bow. Talk to somebody who shoots one. There are two distinctive ways to shoot this bow. The first is most common today is Kyudo, which is the way of the bow. The archer uses the bow to develop the spirit. This is the method taught in dojos around the country and basically around the world. It is very ritualistic in form. It is very relaxing to shoot that style. The way I shoot a Yumi is I shoot more of the Kyujitsu method, which is to shoot with purpose. I'm actually trying to pierce my target with every single shot. So I'm using it as, hopefully, in the spirit that a samurai would use it in warfare. So the bow's uniqueness and things like that make it difficult for a lot of archers to just pick up and shoot. They have to actually, it is definitely a strange bow to shoot compared to a standard recurve and or a standard longbow. To me, it's a challenge, and I actually enjoyed the challenge while I was learning.
Master Godai, you said the Yumi bow is unique. How?
To begin with, the Yumi is asymmetrical. All right, it's classified for the SCA purposes as a longbow, but it doesn't look like any of the longbows that most of the SCA shoots. It can be between 7 and 9 feet tall. My bow is almost 8 feet. It is normally, modern Yumis are laminated wood, bamboo and hardwood laminated in a core, and then usually with bamboo in the belly and the back of the bow. The strings are made of usually either hemp, natural fibers, or they're a synthetic fiber. They're always coated with a sealant to protect them from the weather. The strings don't last as long. Strings are much thinner than a standard bow string. The biggest thing, though, is it is an asymmetrical bow. You're gripped about the lower 1/3 point, and the reverse curves that are built into the bow allow the bow to be shot from this asymmetrical position with no impact on the flight of the arrow. My arrows fly just as straight and true as everybody else's arrows out there. The draw is also unique. The string is normally a little off center to the right of the bow because that's the side you shoot off of, which allows the bow to be shot in your left hand off the right side. The string is drawn back with my thumb. I use 2 fingers to support it, much like the Asiatic style, Mongolian style with a thumb ring. But I don't wear a thumb ring, I wear a glove. And that's traditional to what the samurai would have done, because if you were fighting and your bowstring broke or you had to switch to a sword, you don't want something on your hand that's going to hinder your ability to use your secondary weapon. So using a glove would have been period. It's also drawn back, the string is drawn back behind the head. And so my draw length is 38 inches, and I shoot 39-inch long arrows. And most people shoot a 28-inch long arrow. So my arrow is almost 10 inches longer. Unfortunately, that's one of the things that adds to my bow, because my arrows are about 700 to 800 grains in weight. And they travel at about 170, 175 feet per second. So my arrows are almost double the weight of a normal archer's arrows. But it is unique in the draw. It is unique in its shape. And it is a fun, challenging bow to shoot. It is a great bow to shoot, in my opinion. I've had so much fun over the years learning how to shoot it. and actually developing a proficiency with it.
Master Godai, I shoot a traditional recurve bow. What do I need to do to prepare myself to shoot a Yumi bow?
To shoot a Yumi bow, the first thing you have to do is you've got to realize that the bow is going to be your biggest expense. As with any archery, the bow is the biggest expense. I would recommend for a beginner a fiberglass Yumi. The major reasons for this is because as a beginner, you could actually damage the bow if it was an all bamboo bow and actually destroy your bow accidentally. So fiberglass bows have an initial lower cost. They will survive the mistakes a beginner is going to make. They're easier to retain or maintain, and they're resistant to all weather conditions. So for SCA shooting, it's almost like the perfect bow. Also longevity. The bow with very little maintenance will last you a lifetime. And there's a couple of good places you can pick up a Yumi at. I've got a couple of preferred vendors, one here in North America and one located in Japan. The other thing is the string, of course. You can either get a combo string, you can get a synthetic string, or you can get an all synthetic string. You're going to need several. You're going to break a string while you're shooting. Specifically, I broke a string during 1 year during the archery championship shoot. And I had to actually change out strings in between shoots. So I had a spare on me. I always carry a spare string. The next big part of this, of course, is arrows. With a draw length of 38 inches, I can't buy cedar shafts and make arrows out of them. They're 32 inches max length. So I have a few choices. You have to either buy Kyudo arrows, which I did in the very beginning, which gets expensive because a Kyudo arrow is about $30. So I have to learn how to make my own. And I probably lost several $100s worth of arrows in the very beginning, breaking them or just losing them in the woods when I first started because I was using Kyudo arrows and I hadn't figured out how I was going to make my own. I've used footed arrows where I use Sitka spruce staffs and I use a hardwood in the front. It was a lot of fun making them. It was difficult. You have to make your footings yourself. The problem with that was I could not control the weight of the foot part of the arrow. So I had a lot of inconsistency in the weight of my arrows. I've used an arrow fix tool. Three Rivers sells it to actually do footing that way where I wasn't using a 2-foot. Made the shafts faster, but I found out they would often break on an SCA target, especially a kinetic target, right at that joint or right below that joint. So I've gone to bamboo arrows. It's traditional to Japan. I use Tonkin bamboo from China for my arrows. Has a little bit more weight than traditional Japanese arrow bamboo. But I can build my own arrows. I can get my own points. There's a couple of things you do to help with the points. You can add, because of the size difference in natural bamboo, you're going to want 5/16 and 11/32 points and nocks, depending upon which one you're building. But if you buy in bulk, you can control the weight. You can add, as I do, a weight in front, a 40 grain weight in front to actually give me 165 grain for my forward to center. And I can put a shaft together for about $4. So knowing that you can build an arrow for $4 or go buy an arrow for $30, that's a big difference. The other thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need a thumb glove. You're going to have a glove. If you're pulling the string straight on your thumb, it's going to mess you up. The Kyudo gloves they sell with the wooden thumbs, that is strictly for Kyudo. You cannot shoot SCA archery with a Kyudo glove on. You can't draw your arrows. Not designed for that. The other thing is you're going to want a protector glove for your other hand because your arrows, as you know, if you've ever had a feather slice your hand, feathers are sharp. And then a quiver. A quiver is, you're going to want a side quiver, most probably, a hip quiver. You cannot, I cannot draw a 39-inch arrow over my back. My arms aren't long enough to allow me to draw that arrow out of a quiver on my back. And so there's some costs and things you're going to have to do. The biggest thing I would recommend is that you try it with somebody who has a Yumi. And there are getting more and more people in the SCA every day who actually have Yumis and are shooting Yumis in an SCA style.
The Japanese Yumi is considered to be a period bow in the SCA. How does it compete when in a period shoot?
Well, from the period shoots I've done, it comes down to really one thing. It is the archer skill. And on that day, every day we have archers who have great days and they have bad days depending upon the shoot. I believe the Yumi can stack up against the English longbow and the horse bow on any given day with any given shoot. So it really comes to the archer skill, just like a recurve versus a modern longbow. It comes down to the archer skill. Very competitive. It does carry more energy than some other bows do. So when I hit a target, you usually see the target move. But shooting against both ELBs and the horse bows, it comes down strictly to who is the better archer that day.
Master Godai, thanks for stopping by the tavern today and sharing with us history of Japanese archery and some insight of how to use the Yumi bow, how a person can get started with the Yumi bow, and sharing with us some insight of how the Yumi bow does in a period shoot. I'm looking forward to your return with Master Jeffrey and Noyan Naran. We're all together talking about period bows. Prost.
Prost.
They long had shot so well, and no wonder, for truly they spend time gathered here. They spend time gathered here in tavern archery.